Something is happening behind the scenes in NASCAR right now, and almost nobody is talking about just how big this situation could become. Because this isn't about a crash or a race result or even a controversial call on track. This is something much deeper. This is about power, control, and a growing conflict that could quietly reshape the entire sport. And at the center of it all is a name that carries weight in any room: Michael Jordan. Now that alone should tell you this isn't small, because when someone like Jordan gets involved at this level, it's never just business as usual. It means something serious is happening. And right now, that something is turning into a legal battle that has the potential to impact not just one team, but the entire NASCAR ecosystem. To really understand what's going on here, you have to look at how we got to this point. Because this didn't just happen overnight. This has been building, slowly, quietly in the background, and most fans didn't even notice it. When Michael Jordan partnered with Denny Hamlin to form 23LI Racing, it felt like a huge moment for NASCAR. Not just because of Jordan's global influence, but because it signaled something new, a shift, a different kind of ownership entering the sport. And from the beginning, the expectations were high. This wasn't a casual project. This was a serious attempt to build a competitive, forward-thinking team that could challenge the established order. And for a while, that's exactly what it looked like. The team grew. The performance improved. Drivers like Tyler Reddick started delivering results. And suddenly, 23LI Racing wasn't just another team on the grid. They were becoming a real contender. But success brings attention, and attention brings pressure. And pressure often reveals cracks that weren't visible before. Because as 23LI Racing continued to grow, questions started to come up. Questions about how NASCAR operates behind the scenes. Questions about how teams are supported or limited. Questions about whether the system is truly fair for everyone involved. And this is where things begin to shift. Because those questions didn't just stay internal. They started turning into concerns, then disagreements. And now those disagreements have turned into something much bigger, a legal fight. And here's where it gets serious, because this isn't just about one issue. This appears to involve deeper structural concerns, the kind that could influence how teams function long term. We're talking about things like how revenue is shared between NASCAR and teams, what level of control teams actually have over their operations, and how decisions are made at the highest level of the sport. Now, normally, these kinds of discussions stay behind closed doors, handled quietly, resolved without the public ever really knowing. But this time, it's different. Because now, it's not just any team raising concerns. It's a team backed by Michael Jordan, and that changes everything. Because Jordan doesn't operate like a typical owner. He's not just there for the ride. He's not someone who steps back when things get complicated. He's built his entire legacy on competition, on intensity, and on refusing to accept losing situations. And that mindset doesn't just disappear when you move from basketball to motorsports. If anything, it becomes even more dangerous. Because now, that same competitive drive is being applied to a completely different arena. One where the rules are different, the stakes are different, and the consequences could be much bigger. What makes this situation even more interesting is something Jordan himself said. He admitted that this whole situation has made him nervous. And that might sound surprising at first, because when you think of Michael Jordan, you don't usually associate him with hesitation. But this isn't hesitation. This is awareness. Awareness of just how big this situation has become. Awareness of what's at stake. And awareness that once something like this starts, it's very hard to control how it ends. Because legal battles like this don't stay contained. They expand. They pull in more people, more teams, more attention. And before you know it, something that started as a disagreement becomes a defining moment. Not just for a team, but for an entire sport. And that's exactly why this situation matters. Because if this continues to escalate, it could force NASCAR into a position they haven't faced in a long time. A position where they have to respond, not just internally, but publicly, where decisions have to be made, where compromises might be required, or where lines get drawn very clearly. And while all of that is happening off the track, something else is happening on it. Because 23LI Racing isn't slowing down. They're not fading into the background. They're competing, they're performing, and in some cases, they're thriving. With drivers like Tyler Reddick continuing to show speed and consistency, the team is proving that they belong at the front. And that creates a very unique kind of pressure. Because now, NASCAR isn't just dealing with a legal challenge. They're dealing with a team that's gaining influence at the same time. And that combination can change everything. Because success gives you a voice, and the louder your results, the harder it becomes to ignore what you're saying. So now, this isn't just about disagreement anymore. It's about leverage, it's about influence, and it's about how much impact one team, backed by one of the biggest names in sports, can actually have on the direction of NASCAR. And that leads to the biggest question of all. How far is this going to go? Is this something that gets resolved quietly behind closed doors? Or are we watching the early stages of something much bigger? Something that could eventually force change across the entire sport? Because if there's one thing history has shown, it's that moments like this don't just disappear. They evolve, they grow, and sometimes they become turning points. And right now, it feels like NASCAR might be standing right at the edge of one, with Michael Jordan right in the middle of it. And the truth is, we still don't know how this story ends. But one thing is becoming very clear. This is not just another off-track situation. This is something bigger, something that could shape what NASCAR looks like in the years ahead. And if that's the case, then what we're seeing right now might just be the beginning. And if this really is just the beginning, then what comes next could be even more important than what's already happened. Because situations like this don't stay quiet forever. Eventually, they reach a breaking point, and when they do, everything changes. Right now, NASCAR finds itself in a position it doesn't usually face, a position where the challenge isn't coming from outside the sport, but from within, from its own team. And not just any team, a team backed by Michael Jordan, a figure whose influence goes far beyond racing. Because this isn't just about NASCAR anymore. This is about visibility. This is about attention. And this is about what happens when a global icon starts questioning how a sport operates behind closed doors. Think about it like this. For years, NASCAR has operated in a very structured way. Teams compete, rules are followed, decisions are made at the top. And for the most part, that system has worked. But systems like that only work until someone powerful enough decides to challenge them. And now, that might be exactly what's happening. Because when 23LI Racing begins pushing back, it's not just a complaint, it's a signal that something behind the scenes may not be working the way it should. And whether that's perception or reality, it still creates pressure. And pressure, especially in a sport as competitive as NASCAR, has a way of spreading. Because once one team starts asking questions, other teams start paying attention. They start wondering. They start thinking about their own position. And suddenly, what started as one situation begins to grow. Now here's where things get even more complicated. Because NASCAR isn't just dealing with a single issue. They're dealing with the possibility of a shift in how teams see their role within the sport. Are they simply participants, or are they stakeholders with a stronger voice than before? And that question alone has the potential to change everything. Because if the answer starts leaning towards the second option, then the entire structure of NASCAR could be challenged. And this is where Michael Jordan becomes such a central figure in all of this. Because he represents something different. He represents ownership with influence,
ownership with expectations, and most importantly, ownership that isn't afraid to push back when something doesn't feel right. But pushing back always comes with risk, because once you take that step, there's no easy way to step back. And that's likely why Jordan admitted feeling nervous about this situation. Not because he doubts the fight, but because he understands the scale of it. He understands that this isn't just about winning or losing a case. This is about consequences, long-term consequences. Because depending on how this plays out, it could set a precedent that other teams might follow, a precedent that could redefine how NASCAR operates moving forward. And NASCAR knows that, which is why this situation is so delicate, because any response, any decision, any outcome will be watched very closely.